Yeah, I had to describe why. I had a picture on my Facebook page of me holding a nice 6-pound lobster from one of my beach dive sites, because I also got invited and I was able to join the Lobster Advisory Council.
No kidding.
Yeah, because this Department of Fish and Wildlife looked at the lobster management plan,
Mm-hmm.
and it had not been updated in decades. And so the mission was to overhaul it and pull together a blue chip panel, a council.
It's their favorite phrase, those guys.
Because it's professionally facilitated, the
Yeah.
goals are set out, there's opportunity to bring different parties together. There's also opportunities to say some things can't be handled. You can exclude some decisions because you can't get the whole group to agree. All of those components, now I'm going to go home and look up blue chip, but all of that is built into how they promise to manage the outcome and the process for maximal output. Yeah. So I was selected as a non-consumptive ocean user. And here I had this picture of me holding a very nice 6-pounder. And so I described how I fish, how much I fish, and my reef check engagement. And apparently I'm so far away from the sport fisherman group. My goals are so different. And they said, you're exactly who we're looking for. Because if you don't hunt lobster at all, you're going to demonize anybody who takes them.
Right.
And so you're actually what we're looking for. Somebody who understands lobster and the attraction and the powerful meaning of them.
But it's not the only perspective you bring to the scenario.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when I told them, I said, I'll turn them over, and if it's a female, I put them back.
Yeah.
I said, I was
That's
a 6-pound
practice.
female one time, and she was hard to let go, but I let her go. So that was fun. And that is where I had heard a lot of rhetoric that the lobster population was being abused and decreasing. And all of the good science is that no, it's a very stable population. But nobody saw ocean warming coming. Nobody saw the incredible kelp disaster with that crazy Phyllocinum horneri sargassum invasion.
Yeah.
So they said, we need a plan that can give us tools should something crash the population. And so they had to come up with tools that were acceptable to the sporties.
Is that slang for sport fishermen?
They are called the sporties.
Oh, okay.
And the commercials.
Okay.
And the scientists and the non-consumptive users.
Okay.
And then there were a couple of people that were non-affiliated. I think they were NGO non-affiliates. But they were part of the 12. And It's funny because the Last Supper, you only get 12. This panel could only have 12 people, and there was 2 of us who were non-consumptive, 2 sporties, 3 or 4 commercials. And
it's probably something about like once you get past 12 people, all you do is argue no matter what.
Probably true.
It's probably,
No decision happens in a group bigger than 12.
I don't think I'd ever have a Thanksgiving dinner larger than 12.
Good idea.
Yeah, it's not going to end well.
Because then you need way too much alcohol, and then someone's going to have to sleep over.
That wouldn't be a problem. That wouldn't be the reason I cut it off. I'd be like, all right, we got a couch. Let's make it happen.
I never got to be part of the MPA process, that whole blue chip thing. I read in detail about it, but I never got to be there. And so to get to be on the Lobster Advisory Council was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, how were the conversations? How are the experiences as a quote unquote non-consumptive? How was your interactions with the people who had maybe came to the situation with a very different perspective than you? Like I imagine it was probably okay, but maybe not.
It was a bar fight with everybody with their guns still in their holsters. Nobody trusted anybody. We all came in with expectations, and we were all prickly over certain things. Like as a non-consumptive diver, ocean user, I wanted it to be obvious that the general wealth and health, not health, but the general healthiness of a habitat is a high priority.
Right.
And then the people who needed to consume or extract things didn't want that on the table because there's no one perfect healthy habitat. And so if you just drive a boat through something, you've affected it. So they were very aggressive about not wanting to say there's a perfect untouched Eden that we're trying to get to. We're humans, we're here.
Which is true to some extent, right? Like,
but they were testing me to find out, was I a kelp hugger? Was I just going to be monotonously...
Kelp hugger. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'd die.
and
I'm so going to use that reference now.
And I'm a nurse, so I'm a really social person, but I was getting these big hands-off, verbal body language from the commercial people. men. Everybody was men except one of the scientists, one of the facilitators, and 3 of us in the science non-extractive. But it was mostly guys. And
which
was another part
isn't
of it.
a huge issue, but it definitely changes the communication style.
Yeah.
Like, if you get a group of guys together, the communication style can be a little more aggressive.
Yeah. And
unnecessarily.
Yes, and exactly.
Yeah.
And the locker room interactions, it's just different. So how were the relationships? Originally, everybody was very testy, and we were willing to listen, but we had our arms folded. Like, I don't agree with what you're proposing. And the sport fishermen had issues with commercials. All of them had issues with us non-extractives. We were just like flowers. What are you doing here? You're not using the ocean. Wait, I'm not extracting from the ocean, but I'm using it.
Right.
So initially it was odd, but these facilitators gave us 2 or 3 meetings just to settle down, just to listen and listen and listen. And people would start to try to advocate, and they would say, we're getting there. We're not there yet. And then they had some social plannings. They had some lunch parties. We had to do some activities.
So there was a little bit of team building to
A
create
little
bit of relationship building before you got down to discussion. So you couldn't look across at somebody and just be like, "You're a monster."
And by the 3rd meeting, we actually liked each other. It was bizarre. And then toward the end, I was violently opposed to some of the things they advocated, but I liked the person who was saying it.
Which matters.
And that's what they did for us. Yeah. And so a lot of the things that recreational divers wanted did not go through.
Recreational
just
hunters?
Or
divers? Non-extractors or extractors?
Divers, because the majority of sport fishermen for lobster are hoop netters.
Hoop netters, which I have issues with the newer methods of hoop netting, the conical nets.
They look like traps.
They're very close to traps.
We spent 2 days talking about the trapness. What is trapness? It was like back to my linguistics class, where when does a cup become a bowl? What is the cuppiness? When is a bowliness? And when do they merge? So we had to go through trappiness and figure out what was a trap. And the commercial hoop netters were the most forceful in what they wanted. And the numbers of the lobster they catch is huge, whereas the scuba numbers of lobster are actually quite small.
Yeah, there's a couple people who are very prolific in their take.
Oh, yeah. And they showed us those numbers, that there were people who took 300 and 400 lobsters a year, but the average lobster, the average person who gets a license, I
gets
think
under 20.
Exactly.
Under 20 easy.
Easy under 20.
So when you say commercial hoop netters, is that commercial fishermen or sport hoop netters?
Yes, sport hoop netters.
I'm like, I didn't know there was commercial hoop netting. They use commercial trapping.
Yeah.
Okay.
There wasn't much representation for scuba diving and lobster hunting.
Okay.
Most of the sport catch was represented for hoop netters.
Interesting.
Although there were some free divers. They were represented.
Okay.
But for scuba, most scuba divers don't take lobster, so we were almost grouped into a kind of a non-extractive thing. But it's okay. I just had this feeling that people on the boat would talk to me, because I was diving on boats. I think I dived 42 dive boats in the year that I was on the council. I was diving nonstop. And I would tell people, hey, I'm on the Lobster Advisory Council. Talk to me. Tell me what you think about lobsters. And then that was my job. And all the other representatives were supposed to go back to their constituencies and gather information. And a lot of the ideas that the diving community had didn't make any difference to the population of lobsters.
What do you mean? Like their solutions or their suggestions?
We always started at midnight. As I was growing up and diving, the season would always open at midnight.
I honestly think that's one of the best changes they made, because I think it cut down on fatalities of divers. Yeah.
But it had nothing to do with the lobster health.
Oh,
We're there to do a new management plan for lobstering, and that suddenly became a cultural event. And it's super important because humans are important. And
they're all right. Well, let me just go over this. So for those people who might be new to lobster diving or have never done it before, opening time used to be opening night, where it would happen at 12:01 on the first Saturday after October. And so what you would have, and I was just telling somebody this, what you would have in California is the most dangerous night of diving of the entire year, because you would have people who literally only dive for lobster. They would show up kind of tired from an entire day, because it was on a Saturday, right? Mm-hmm. And so they would do something all Saturday, maybe be in the sun, a little sunburn, exhausted, and getting their stuff ready, going to buy their card at the last minute. They haven't been diving in months. And then they show up, it's dark, they haven't checked conditions, and they go out and drop into the blackness of the ocean, and they go and try and dive with one thing in mind, which is catching lobster.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Target
being
lock.
a good... What was that?
Target lock.
Target lock, not paying attention to being a good diver, not focusing on the proper skills to keep yourself safe. And it has all happened to anybody who's ever done lobster diving. You're like, oh, I have this much air left. I should probably go up, but there's one right there, and you get suckered in, and you chase it, and you're like, God, whether you get it or you don't get it, you kind of like swim up and you make it out, and you're like, that's stupid. Why did I do that? That was dangerous. But in that moment, you make that split decision. And for some people, it results in a really unfortunate situation,
I think an average of 3 people, there was a stretch of time where they said, we could account for 3 deaths each year for opening night, somewhere in the state. I mean, it's only from Santa Barbara South, really.
Yeah. And the crazy thing is, I used to teach scuba classes, and they'd be in the fall, and somebody would find out about lobster diving, and they would be like, oh, I'm going to go out as soon as I'm certified. And I'm like, please don't do that. I'm like, please really don't do that. And I would dissuade them, because I'm like, I know it seems fun, and I promise you it is fun, but it is the most dangerous thing you can do.
You're not diving, you're hunting.
As a recreational... Well, and you're doing it where you don't have the life-protecting part of the situation down yet. Mm-hmm. You are a beginner at the I'm just surviving underwater stage, And so it is the most dangerous. So I can see why that change is important from midnight to 6 a.m., because during the day, early morning, a little bit more chill, light is out, less chance of panic, like lots of good things.
Yeah, it made a huge difference. And there's so little emergency support services at night. It's really mostly for boats.
Yes.
And so just trying to be available to rescue people from midnight to 6 was really harsh. I think that the law enforcement was the biggest advocate for that.